Welcome to the Bouquet Toss, the podcast that helps you plan your wedding day your way. We're your hosts, Jessica
and Sari, and each episode we deep dive into the traditions and trends you either love, hate, or straight up don't understand to help us all figure out why we do weddings the way that we do. The Bouquet Toss is a Love Stories TV podcast.
This episode is brought to you by Loved Twice Bridal. Buy and sell once-loved designer wedding gowns at lovedtwicebridal.com.
Today, we are going to discuss the average wedding cost. Is it math, myth, or manipulation?
Dun, dun, dun. I feel like there is a real need to discuss like where these figures come from and how these studies are done.
Yeah. I mean, let's just start there.
Yeah.
Okay. I actually want to pause for a second because this episode topic is what made me stop and think about this for the first time. You know how every time you get a survey and you're like, ugh, I don't want to take it?
Yeah.
That prevents accurate information from actually coming out, right? So when people say the average wedding cost, this is the average that's been reported, right? And like you've said too, often people who are not quite so much on a budget or have a little more to spend or just are a little less worried about the dollar amount,
right,
feel a little more comfortable sharing what they actually spent. And often, and completely, that's going to skew the numbers.
Yeah.
And it makes me feel guilty. Every time I don't do a survey, I'm like, oh, wait, but I'm not helping the people.
Right. Yeah. I think, it's important to know sort of the survey size, how many people are sampled in these studies. Also, who's being served by the way these numbers are being reported, and especially if the numbers are higher than you might think they should be. And so we just kind of want to break a little bit of this down and pull some of these stats and just really talk about them and unpack it a bit.
Yeah, let's start.
Okay. So according to The Knot, in 2023, they did a survey of nearly 10,000 couples.
Wow, okay.
And they determined that the average cost was $35,000.
Okay.
So, but I think an important thing to remember here is that all of these couples are actively using The Knot, and they are surveying their own user base. And a lot of the couples who are planning weddings and using their tools and finding their vendors on these platforms are probably spending more because they are hiring all professionals to do their day. And as we've said before, weddings can look any number of different ways, not just all executed by professionals. And I also think it's important to know that the average doesn't necessarily mean normal, right? Because it's taking the high end of the spectrum that is reported and the lower end. And when we have these outliers that might be in the millions or hundreds of thousands, that's going to skew numbers higher.
Right. So we want the median.
Yeah.
Take us back to math class.
Math class, right? It's the mean
is the
average. The median is the middle value.
The middle number, yeah.
But what is the majority is a totally separate figure, really.
Right. And so in this particular study, I'm assuming they didn't break it down beyond that. Okay.
Right.
Right. And so yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of things that come with this because, it's helpful to have this figure, right? It's helpful to know on average. I think it gives everybody kind of a place to check. But I also think exactly what you're saying, knowing the average is 35,000, I think when you start putting numbers together and maybe you have that sticker shock, you're like, oh, but the average in 2023 is 35K. And so if you're a little above that or you're kind of under it, you're kind of well, that's normal.
Yeah.
And not to say it's not. Clearly the numbers are there. We've talked about this at length, the cost of doing that traditional wedding where you're feeding 100 plus people and, dancing and drinking and everything. The costs are what they are to some extent. Of course, there is high end and low end, but it's also one way of doing it. And it makes you kind of feel like it's normalized to meet that number.
Right. Another thing I think that is really important to keep in context is even though The Knot surveyed 10,000 couples, which isn't a small amount by any means, there's an average of 2 million weddings that happen every year. 2 million marriages happen in the United States.
In the United States.
Every year. That's like the average. I think during COVID, it kind of dipped down below 2 million. And then in the year right after the pandemic, like 21, 22, I think it was more like 2.5 million. But like,
More?
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, because of the buildup, right?
Right,
Like
right, right,
people
right.
who had like postponed and then did it later. And so when you think about the total number being like 2 million couples getting married in some form or fashion per year, and then this survey is only representing 10,000.
Right.
That's a small survey sample.
Yeah, I mean, that and it's people planning a very similar type of wedding.
Yeah.
It's the people that need a variety of different vendors that they're finding on the knot or elsewhere. And typically it's like they're either doing the all-inclusive venue or it's the caterer, but it's like the hair and makeup, the photographer, the videographer, the floor. Are florists typically on the knot?
Yeah.
Anyone's
yeah.
on the knot. So yeah, I mean, I think that being their clientele, it's that type of wedding, right? It's like the wedding where you have multiple vendors. It's less of the DIY situation.
Yes.
And so, yeah, those costs are in a certain place. It doesn't mean you can't do something on a different price. But I think the thing that like we always kind of spat about is like the wedding tax.
Right.
And tons of people believe that like the costs of weddings are what they are in part because when the word wedding is involved, people feel they can charge more. And I mean, I know you've got takes on this. So what is your first thought when we say that? And then like, how do you kind of balance it with like respect for the vendors and the people that are?
Yeah, of course. I think it's yes and no. You know, there's certainly situations where that might be true. But a lot of times I think it's because working with a wedding couple, an engaged couple who's planning a wedding, they are going to need a higher touch point than just working with like a one-off client. Like, especially if you're thinking about like a florist, like you're doing mock-ups, you're doing, visuals of like what those arrangements are going to look like. There's hard costs involved. They have to order extra product in case some arrive damaged or whatever. Like there's a lot of factors at play. And because I think of all of the pressure put on this one day being the most special, amazing, meaningful day of your life, like the vendors almost like need to justify the extra job stress that they're dealing with.
They have to live up to it.
Of that. Yeah, I think there's pressure on all sides.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the moral of the story is that we all need to throw more parties so they don't feel like one-offs.
Right.
No, but seriously, I think, yeah, I agree. I think that there is like ways it can be spun when it's like a retail or like a, like a retail good or something like that, where like, yes, if you put wedding in front of it, like that dress could be more expensive because people are kind of willing to pay for more when it's wedding related.
Right.
But that's like not a service. That's like an actual thing, right? I think when it's a service, yeah. I mean, we talked in an episode about videography and like, what happens if they miss a moment? And like, yeah, that's for real. Like you're trusting that these people are going to capture everything because you don't get a redo.
Yeah.
And they have that level too of like attention and, concentration and whatnot that they have to be bringing to the table on the job.
Another survey that I wanted to bring up in the context of all of this was one done by like an independent wedding like research marketing company called Splendid Insights.
Okay.
And their report actually showed that 81% of weddings fell below that average figure reported by the Knot. So when we're talking about majority versus like that feels very different. And I think that's where I start to wonder, like, why are these numbers being reported in this way? Like, who does it serve to make this sort of like the mainstream message that we're all seeing about the cost of weddings?
Right.
When the majority of people are spending less.
And so what's like the body of people from that study?
In comparison, the survey from Splendid Insights surveyed 52,738 people. So larger survey size.
And from where?
So this was global.
Okay.
Not just US. So I would be curious to know. And like this is all part of like like analyzing the data, right? Like knowing like what percentage was in the US versus overseas, but they did their survey in 6 different languages.
Wow.
And included people from Africa, Asia, Australasia, Central America, Europe, Middle East, North America, South America, South Asia, and Southeast Asia.
Wow.
So yeah, a more broad study or survey. But I do think it's just interesting, I think, to compare the two and just consider all of this in terms of like America being, 2 million weddings per year. The knot sample size is 10,000. This one is showing, a higher number of surveyed people. And not that the average is necessarily all that different, but the majority of respondents were spending less than the other survey. So,
because
all just food for thought.
Yeah, I mean, and no matter what, you're always going to have these huge, big, whether they're celebrity weddings or whatnot, that are, blowing that $35K out of the water, like multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars, right?
Yeah, and some in the millions, especially in like the Middle East and stuff.
Yeah. So that like completely makes the average, higher, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think that like the moral here is that there's going to be conflicting information that just kind of like when you hear quoted numbers in terms of like very headliney, like this is the average or whatever, kind of have this in mind, like grain of salt in some ways.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And then I think it just still stands that there's going to be costs that you can reduce, that you can cut. We talked in one episode about having like 3 tiers for every vendor.
Yeah.
So you have like an A, B, and C at different price points, different things that they're offering for every one of your vendors. And for some, you pick the A, for some, the B, for some, the C. And you kind of like have to do this mismatched kind of collective. I think like something that is very common is that people who get married in peak season, so like June, July, August, September even.
Yeah, fall is really big. It's
October,
becoming the
like
season now.
Right, because our weather is so unpredictable.
Yeah.
But if you're getting people, like I think couples, brides and grooms getting married in those peak seasons, just expect that things will be higher because of it, which in some cases, yes, they will.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that there aren't incredible vendors out there that are working at a lower price point that you can kind of like balance things in. I think that a lot of people, like our biggest advice is when you're planning your wedding, set a budget and stick to it.
And base it on your own personal financial situation.
What are you willing to spend?
Yeah. What are you willing to spend? What do you have in savings? Like what can you save during the period of your engagement? What are your families willing and able to contribute?
Right.
How much of that do you want to take if it comes with opinions? Like there's so many different things to weigh, but like at the end of the day, you can't look at these average numbers and think, oh, I have to spend that. And I think that's really the message that like we want to hone in on is like, these averages are there to give you some sort of like baseline idea of what like a professional executed wedding could cost. But at the end of the day, you should spend what you're willing and able to spend and not overextend yourself.
Yeah. Never go into debt, right?
Yeah.
I think too, it helps to have this idea of an average in mind when you like are first in that like, okay, we're engaged, like what kind of wedding do we want? And like to have a number to work towards in terms of savings is helpful.
Yeah.
I think then also it's like when you get to that point, it is so easy to balloon from there. Like to say, for instance, maybe you said 15K is like what we want to spend. And then you start to book vendors and you start to
quotes,
right. And you're like, okay, well maybe actually 25K is what we're willing to spend because you see how much you really need.
It's like budget creep, like in like project management, they call it like scope creep, but like this, which can balloon the budget, and it's like the same kind of concept. Like when it comes to wedding planning,
and
like,
it happens all the time.
You take the bare bones of like what a wedding is and build up to it. And if you just keep adding and building up, then it increases your budget.
And I think inevitably a lot of people end up like increasing that cap just a tad, just like naturally, because also one of the biggest things that people forget is that tipping is gonna be an extra like 10% probably total for everything on top of it. And so if you haven't budgeted for that in it, you've well blown over your budget.
Yeah, so true.
You have to I mean, I think that there has to be a bit of flexibility, but I do also think being strict with a cap that you don't want to spend over forces you to then say, well, okay, this is going to be over, so we have to find an alternative solution that's going to be under. And it gives you there's so many tools out there today that you can just find this information now. Is the price of every vendor actually transparent? Absolutely
no, and
not.
that's a whole other thing
Right.
that makes this process confusing and difficult to navigate, I think, for couples, is there's so little price transparency.
Right.
Especially when it comes to the vendors, the individual vendors.
Right.
Obviously, if you're shopping for something online, you can see the price and know what it's going to cost. Click, check out, buy, But when it comes to wedding vendor research, a lot of these vendors don't put their pricing on their website.
No, they don't. And that is a very easy way for you to fall in love with a wedding venue because you went to see it so that you could get the full scope.
Yeah.
And you fall in love and then you're like, okay, well, maybe I do have that extra $5,000 because I love this and I want to make it happen. And you maybe wouldn't have spent that before.
Right.
I also want to say I have seen in some of these Facebook, bride groups, the girlies looking out for the girlies and they're like, has anybody viewed XXX venue? What are the prices? Because
that's great.
Crowdsource that.
Right.
So many people are, and especially when there are these regional groups, everyone's checked out the same venue.
Yeah, that's
it's
so
help each other
helpful.
out and ask what it is, because then if we can have a running list here, it's much easier for people. Tons of questions. It's every time someone gets engaged and joins that group, it's hey, everybody, I'm looking for a venue where it's X amount per head. Can I find that, in this area? And it's the same question, the same answers keep coming up because it's those go-tos. Sometimes people have to caveat this was 12 years ago or this was 2 years ago. I don't know if things have changed, but it's
things change fast sometimes.
Yeah. And the consumers, the brides are having to band together to kind of really get the full scope of what they could be spending because it's just not out there.
Yeah.
By design.
I do think I think wedding vendors are doing themselves and their potential customers, clients, a disservice by not making their pricing a little bit more transparent. Even just starting prices,
Right.
I think would be a helpful benchmark for couples to have in mind, because if they see a number that is above what they truly can afford, they can eliminate themselves immediately and move on and find something that's going to work better for them. And it also doesn't waste the vendor's time meeting with people who don't have the funds to truly afford their services and get into a situation where, they have to sell or upsell or almost convince a couple of the value of what they're providing. There's no question of the value that you're providing, but it doesn't mean that every couple can afford it,
I mean, yes. And what that makes me think about is by design, if you have a platform where it's run off of advertising, the linger time, the clicks, the amount of actual time that's spent there is what's fueling the engine. And so it benefits them for you to have to send an email or click around a lot to see if they have included their pricing.
Right.
And then come back when you've gotten the answer via email.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's a business model. And at the end of the day, yes, it's a resource that people rely on, vendors rely on, but when it's kind of designed with ambiguity in mind because it forces your time on the site to be longer, yeah, I mean, you have to wonder.
It's a valid point. And not to mention, as well, the cost of advertising on that platform by the vendors.
Right.
And so just at a minimum, we're talking hundreds of dollars a month just to be listed on some of these websites. And that's just one city maybe.
Sure.
And, it can really add up. And at the end of the day, those marketing costs are getting passed
Baked
down into
what
their
you pay.
pricing, to what goes on to the couples. And so it is, and I think this is what it's an important note to make about what is considered the wedding industrial complex. And I
Yes.
think it's that
Go off,
whole,
sis.
I think it's that whole marketing engine. There's a lot of discourse, and there has been for years about it online. And it's never against the small business owners or the vendors who are actually showing up and providing service like to these couples on the wedding day. Like nobody has an issue with a small business owner charging
what they're
like
worth.
appropriately for their worth and for their artistry and for their creativity. Like absolutely no issue with that at all. But I think the bigger things at play are like all of the marketing messages that we've been fed over the year of like the stuff that adds to that pressure, like one chance, one special day, you know, you never get a do-over, you got to do it big, you know. And so that is all at play in the advertising, and then the vendors having to pay to advertise to get seen, and then the costs getting passed on to the couples. It's just it's that is what the wedding industrial complex, I think, really is.
Yeah. And I think, you know, we obviously support all sides of the industry.
Yeah, of course.
But I do think like somebody's got to kind of stop and take like a step back and just look at it. Like it's not to say like I still had my wedding. Like I still used that site to look at people's reviews. Like, you know, I think like it all has its purpose, but like truthfully, the Bouquet Toss is us trying to just kind of say like, let's look at these things from another way.
Yeah.
Just so that we have a little bit more of a full picture of like why we do weddings the way that we do, how we got here.
Yeah, exactly. And it's all just to hopefully relieve some of the pressure, like bring everyone back down to earth and remind ourselves, you know, like, of course, it is a absolutely special, meaningful, amazing day. It is going to be like one of the best days of your life.
Yeah.
But you don't want to overspend or put yourself under so much stress and pressure, like for the financial side of it, if you can't truly afford it.
Right.
You know, and that's really the biggest thing for me is I don't want to see any couples like starting their marriage with like a huge, you know, pile of debt on their backs, because that just adds extra stress as you're starting your marriage.
Right.
So.
Yeah. I mean, I think that something also like a good way to look at it, because it is such a one-day thing, is how much you can do in your planning to reduce, reuse, recycle.
Yeah.
Like what can you do to repurpose decor, or, you know, like talking about that Facebook group, everybody asking each other the same, like they're getting married in the same places. Somebody just decorated that place.
Yeah.
You can use their decor.
Yeah.
You know, like I think we all a little bit feel this need to reinvent the wheel, because it's like we want it to be so personal to us.
Yes, it has to be the most unique, like personalized thing ever.
I mean, I felt that. I was like, it needs to be different. And like, yes, but also we're not reinventing the wheel.
Yeah.
Like the sheer numbers of people getting married, right? And I think just the thought that like the more that you can use something that somebody's already used, down to your dress.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we're going to talk more about that later in this episode, but it's, you know, it doesn't take away from how special it is. It doesn't make it not yours.
Right.
And most of it, like, you can't keep anyway. Like, you just have, like, boxes in your attic then.
Yeah, you don't want it collecting dust. I mean, that's such a good point. It's like, why are we so precious over certain aspects of things when, like, there's been thousands of couples who've gotten married at this venue before, or who've used roses in their bouquets before. Like, like, why would we be precious about things like our dress? You know what I mean? Like, especially if you can, like, save half off on things like that.
Yeah.
And the decor aspect is like such a good point as well.
And I don't want to add the pressure to like say like you're not reinventing the wheel, so like bet, go figure it out. You know, like I do think there are people like one of my best friends got married in a parking lot, and they had never. It was like
it doesn't sound very glamorous.
It doesn't. Her father, oh my God, he was like, my daughter's getting married in a parking lot. They're gonna be. I can't believe it. Okay. Anyway, but it was a music venue that one of her friends owned, and they hadn't done any weddings before, and they were like, we think we could, and she was like, great, let's figure it out. She transformed it. And there was an outdoor stage because it's a music venue, and then an arcade. And this was like in the middle, like the parking lot in the middle. And you never would have known.
Wow.
Like it was just, she had a vision, and she did kind of reinvent the wheel in a way. And those costs were lower for her.
Yeah.
You know?
And I mean, when you get resourceful and creative, like you can save money. If you're seeking out alternatives to those traditional services, there are lots of places to save.
Yeah. But it's also a lot more in terms of planning, and it's a lot more stress and logistics, and it's time or money.
Yeah, it's all a balance.
Mm-hmm.
It truly is. We should also probably touch on the fact that these costs can really vary and shift depending on like the season you're getting married,
Yes.
the region of, the country where you're planning. Obviously, like Manhattan's average, I think is like 85,000
of what they're telling you.
Well, yeah, that we're hearing about. But even like the ultra luxury people who are getting married here probably aren't reporting, their spending on those surveys. So it could even be higher.
Right.
But
the day of the week.
Yeah, the day of the week. I mean, there's so many factors at play in what these things could cost.
Right. And I mean, I also want to point out, so I was the Real Weddings editor for the Budget Heavy Bride for years. And so part of that job was taking the submissions that we had of all people who are amazingly willing to put out their budget breakdown and show other people, like pay it forward of here's, what it cost. Now, I will say a lot of the lists that we would get were missing information, right? And we have to make an educated guess because we don't want to say this was a $5K wedding when they left out catering.
Well, I hope we wouldn't publish it if they left out something that big.
Well, right. But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or if it was gifted, right? Because a lot of people have like a vendor or something gifted and then they still give us like what they spend.
Yes.
But then we have to go to them and say, okay, but like how much was this gift? Because that's part, Yeah. And I would do a lot of that. And it's like no pressure. I mean, I even feel funny about like publishing the nitty-gritty of the details of the dollar amount that I've spent.
Yeah.
Even though I've seen so many people do it. And so I also think, I know we harped on this in the beginning, but like that plays into it. Like if you aren't yourself willing to express it, then like we can never take what we're hearing in terms of numbers as Bible because it's skewed in so many ways.
It's so true.
It's just not the full information and you're never going to get it. Like even vendors that people really trust, like they also sometimes don't even they don't have their prices out there.
And we've had submissions over the years where the vendors have asked us not to include their pricing because they know it's going to change over time and they don't want to be beholden to that rate that was from years ago.
Or they did like a special thing, they bartered or something and they're like, this was a special rate, like this is not my going rate.
Exactly.
Yeah, you really don't know.
Yeah. And and that's a good point too when considering these studies. It's like, well, what are the line items that are included in that average? Like, did that include honeymoon? Did it include rings? Because I see things like that and it's like, that's a large chunk of money if you're including that. And then, like when I, was planning, I think I was thinking like, what of these things can I use again? And if I'm going to repurpose it or reuse it after the wedding, do I include it in the budget or is that like a freebie?
It's like I made myself money
like
from that.
Girl math or whatever. Like, like, oh, if your husband bought a suit to wear to the wedding and he's going to wear it again to another wedding, like, is it a wedding part expense? Of the wedding expenses?
I know.
Or not?
I mean, I definitely did stuff like that. We did budget in for our rings just because, like we needed to know that we had the money for it. But in like the overall number, if I was to tout it, I don't think I'd include that.
Right. Is it like things that are only used day of the wedding?
Right.
Or,
I know.
So
and there's tons of things.
It's not scientific at the end of the day. Maybe that's the real message of this is like, it's not a science.
It's not a science. And it ultimately comes down to how financially fit you are.
True.
Because if you're good at like balancing your money and everything elsewhere outside of your wedding, like that is going to creep in. And I mean, that's why we've done so many episodes with financial experts and we'll do more.
Yes.
Because it's like, it just bleeds into weddings from like what your habits are. I mean, I'm even thinking about it, like if we're going by this logic, every dress I ordered on Amazon when I was panic ordering before my bachelorette because I suddenly decided I must wear white on every day.
Budget for like the bride bridal wardrobe.
Right. And most people don't include that.
Yeah.
And that is part of it. Now, granted, I will use it more
now.
Right. I'm going to rewear this stuff, but it is part of it. And you kind of like don't even like think about it in like the total budget of what you're spending.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's like also because I mean, maybe I need better financial fitness, but like
we all do.
all
I mean,
do.
honestly,
we all do.
Yeah, we all need more financial education, I think, in this country.
At the end of the day, we're not going to solve this issue.
No, but I think we've unpacked a lot of it, and hopefully given everyone a lot to think about.
Something different to think about.
Yeah.
But on that note, we are going to bring in our guest,
Yes,
Sarah from Loved Twice Bridal, and she's going to give us another look at what it looks like to wear a secondhand dress.
Yes, a great way to save and a savvy alternative.
So we've been talking all about trends,
And a particular fashion trend that we like to just think about, dream about, is getting a luxury designer dress for less. So today we have Sarah Ghabbour with us from Loved Twice Bridal to talk all about getting a luxury wedding dress for less. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you? Thanks for coming.
Good. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat.
I mean, we're just so excited to see these gorgeous dresses behind you.
Like, get me in there. I want to look in those racks right now.
Right?
Totally.
Yeah. And so, okay, I think just start off by kind of, explaining to us, because I think when you initially think like bridal savings on a gown, you think, I'll go to the sample sale, right? Tell us how Loved Twice Bridal is different.
Sure. So Love Twice Bridal is a luxury bridal consignment store that bridges the gaps between buyers and sellers on the resale market. Traditionally, brides who are shopping sample sales are looking for savings, right? That's ultimately the goal of these sample sales. But what I don't think brides realize is oftentimes these sample gowns have gone through the ringer. They're on the boutique floor. They are tried on by multiple brides in any given season. They are handled by multiple stylists. Imagine how many clips go onto this dress. The gown is stretched out. The beads fall off. The lace, the tulle, it's ripped. So yes, you are saving. However, you're probably going to put quite a bit more money into the gown to repair it before you even alter the dress to you. So buying a secondhand dress, quite frankly, ends up being a better alternative because it's owned by one girl who wore it for one day. And nowadays she's wearing multiple outfits, right? So she's not wearing it for 10 or 12 hours. She's theoretically wearing it for 4 or 5 hours before she's on to the next dress. You can imagine that girl's taking better care of her dress on her wedding day, because photos are forever, than a sample that lives in a store for 6 months, 12 months before it goes into a sale.
Right. And so there are the obvious benefits, like you're saying. I think also it's just cutting down on so much waste when you think about it. Of course, these designers are putting incredible work into these dresses, but for them to see the light of day for 4 hours is so sad. Why shouldn't somebody else wear it?
I mean, and some of these couture dresses, right? This is where we kind of set ourselves apart in that we truly curate our collection based off of how designers produce their dresses. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of transparency in the market on production models, but we kind of can get a good idea based off of price point. So dresses that retail for about $3,500 or more are truly made in a made-to-order fashion and are not cut in bulk, right? So that's one step you can take as far as sustainability. But with the production of every wedding dress, there's about 2,500 gallons of water that's used.
What?
So, yeah. It is, I mean, when you think about that and just your carbon footprint and any sort of day-to-day thing, but this is the one thing you can do to kind of leave a better earth for your kids or your, whoever. It seems like a no-brainer.
God. We talk all the time about sustainable weddings and things that you can do, because just in general, a one-day celebration does generate a ton of waste.
Especially the cost per wear when you're considering an item, when you're spending so much on a dress you only wear one time.
I know.
Being able to have it go on and breathe a second life and not produce a whole nother garment with all of that water. I mean, that's a stat I had never heard before.
That's crazy.
It is.
Yeah. So we're doing our part to make it easier for girls to buy a secondhand gown without compromising on style, service, any of the reasons why you would maybe find it a little bit more challenging to buy one.
Right. So in order to do that, can you talk a little bit about how you curate your collection of dresses? Because I imagine this also depends on having brides who are willing to then give their dress to somebody else, right?
Yeah. So this is kind of, again, where we kind of separate ourselves from the pack as far as the resale marketplace goes. A traditional marketplace, there really are no restrictions on what you can list, what item you can list, what you're selling it for. No one really is watching that. For us, we truly curate the collection. It starts with a prerequisite list. Your dress should be 4 years or newer. It should retail for $3,500 or more, and it should be in ready to wear condition. For there's basic minimums. If your dress meets those three requirements, we invite you to fill out an intake form. We look up your dress. Is it relevant to the market? Is this what girls are really looking for? The last thing you need is a bunch of listings of vintage dresses that are not going to sell. And now you're clogging up your website for girls to filter through these listings that are never going to do anything. So this is where we get kind of picky, and it's our pride and joy. Girls come in and they're like, oh my God, I just saw this dress across the street and it's 50% off. How is that possible? It's because we know what girls are looking for. Once you fill out the form, we do our market research to figure out if it's something we want to help you sell. You send it to us. We handle the listing for you. You're hands off, out of sight, out of mind. You do not have to reach out to us. If and when your dress sells, you make back 50% of the sale.
Wow. And so do any of the brides who purchase gowns with you end up then relisting them after, or do you only take gowns that were worn one time?
No. Absolutely. We invite our brides to resell their dresses, obviously pending the condition of the dress. If she got married in the desert and it's raining and it's trashed on the bottom, no. But assuming it's still in great condition and relevant to the market, absolutely. We will help her give it a next life.
Amazing.
That's awesome. So my biggest question is, like, I'm imagining if I were in LA, which clearly we're not, but walking into the store, and what if you fall in love with a dress that doesn't fit you? And, you know, unlike a store where they could say, oh, we'll order it in your size, how do you handle that?
Sure. So because we are off the rack, we don't limit our inventory by size. We have dresses size 00 to 22, and that inventory is always changing. So no, it might not fit you right away, but no wedding dress will. It was never tailored for you. What we have found is brides actually are fitting into our dresses better than a standard sample at a bridal boutique because they've already been altered and because they're closer to their actual size than a basic size that lives on the rack, right? So a size 00 girl, she's going to be swimming in a size 8 sample at a made to order boutique, right? Versus she's going to actually try on a size 2 or a 4 in that dress. And you're going to be able to envision how that fits way better than her trying on an 8 or a 10.
Absolutely. And what about like larger sizes? Because something I feel like is very like, I don't know, custom nowadays is at a lot of bridal boutiques, they're like, order 17 sizes too big and then take it in from there and it'll be easier. And it's like, is that because you're going to spend more money to get a larger dress and then you're also going to spend more on alteration? So it's like a little confusing as to why that's the case. But especially if, you know, you have plus size clientele and people that are looking for the higher sizes, how do you work with that?
Yeah. So ordering up is a bridal industry standard. It's not one particular boutique that does that. The reason they do that is because it's easier to take a dress in than it is to make it bigger, right? So it's not to say they're trying to upsell you into a larger size. Alterations are going to need to happen regardless because the dress was never made to you. And here's kind of like a little insider thing too. Even when you order a dress that's custom made to your measurements, there's a very good chance you're still going to need alterations because they're making this dress on a form. They don't have the same proportions as you. You know, like, sure, they know your cup size, but like, where do your breasts sit, right? That's something you want to be mindful of. So alterations are to be expected, whether you made to order a dress or whether you bought off the rack. And I think that's a really good thing you need to keep in mind. For us, because we carry a wide range of sizes, you're trying on dresses that actually fit you much closer than a sample is where you have to envision it. And we could talk through those alterations process, whether you're in store or through our try at home program, because you do have access to our stylists online.
Okay, perfect segue.
Yes.
I want to know more about the try at home.
Yeah.
Because to me, I tried on, I can't even tell you how many dresses. And I want to know the logistics. Like, how does this dress show up at your home? How many can you try on? Tell us all of that.
Totally. Yeah. So the business was born out of the fact that if you realistically want someone to buy a dress secondhand, you have to give them the chance to try it on. You should not be buying your dress sight unseen from a stranger that you don't know who's on the other end. Let's put it out there.
On Facebook.
Sadly, that's what these resale platforms do, right? It's like you don't know who's on the other side. You pray to God that whatever listing she put together is accurate. And then when you get the dress, you hope it fits, right? Like it's unrealistic. I think there was a study that the Knot put together, the Knot 2023 wedding study. They said 93% of brides hire, quote unquote, a professional to find their wedding dress. So where's the professional in a secondhand purchase? Unfortunately, these resale platforms don't have one. So our try at home program fills that hole. It gives you the tools necessary to commit to a secondhand gown. For $60 plus shipping, you put down a deposit towards your gown. You get one gown. And you get the dress for 3 days. And in those 3 days, you try it on in the comfort of your home. You invite your mom, you invite your girlfriends, whoever it is that would be at your private appointment. Try it on. Make sure it's in the quality you expect it to be in. If for whatever reason you're unsure, use that time to go to a tailor. Take the dress to a tailor, get their opinion, see how much it's going to cost for alterations so that you're able to make that decision. If you decide to keep the dress, the $60 is applied towards your balance. And if you don't, you lose the $60.
Got it. So I imagine a really savvy way to do this is to go to any store. If you're unable to go to the LA location, but if you go to any bridal store and just try on everything, which is my advice to anyone anyway. Like even if you know that you never ever dreamed of yourself in a certain style, try it on anyway, just to say that you did and to like, because you might be surprised.
So surprised.
Right. But if you do that and you kind of like whittle it down to a style that you really love, and then you can look through the inventory at Loved Twice Bridal, and maybe there is that gown that you're like, okay, I think this is close to it, and then you get to still try it on.
Totally. And we get that quite a bit. We are Google merchants. It sounds crazy, but like if you do an organic Google search, our product's going to come up. And that's because we are curating the collection based off of what we know made to order boutiques are carrying. So don't be surprised if you find that same dress for 50% off on our website. That's very strategic, you know?
Right.
Would you say that that's around the average cost savings of the gowns that you guys have in store?
Yes. So there are a couple of factors that go into our pricing. On average, you're going to see about a 45 to 50% savings first time around. Obviously, depending on the age of the dress, the condition of the gown, that might kind of factor into the ultimate pricing. We have dresses that are discounted 20% off because they're brand new with tags, unaltered. We also have dresses that are 70% off because they're a little bit older, maybe discontinued styles. And so you're going to get a really good range of discounts. And then from a price point perspective, we have dresses that start at about $1,800 and go up to $15,000. Those are secondhand prices.
Wow. So original price in like up there.
Yeah. I mean, so the one that's at $15,000, retail price is about $25,000.
Wow.
And she never wore it. It sounds crazy, but she never wore it.
Was this a celebrity?
Like, yeah, why didn't she wear it?
Why? Okay, so great story. She actually bought 6 wedding dresses.
Cool, me too.
And
What?
got married, had the full. Oh,
Totally normal.
So even though it's secondhand, quite a bit of our product has never walked down an aisle.
Wow.
So you can really get a steal on some of this stuff, especially the stuff that's brand new, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Brand new. There's
That's
always
really
this
cool.
notion of secondhand that you're going to get like the rags and the dirty stuff. But
Right.
like, we're really picky about the product we take in.
Yeah.
It's nice that it takes the guesswork and the surprise, out of it, to your point. You just never know what you're going to get with some of these other platforms. So the fact that, you do the work for the brides gives them that peace of mind.
Yeah.
Right.
Especially when making such a big decision.
We've had horror stories. Girls are buying dresses sight unseen. I had one bride, she hired a private investigator to find the seller who never sent her the dress.
Oh, no.
You guys, like, this is like, we don't need more marketplaces on the resale game. Like, we don't. We need people to take their hands out of the pot and leave it to people who know what they're doing.
Yeah. Especially just like with something, I mean, these are luxury gowns. This is like fashion with a capital F. Like, you need to know fashion to really be doing this.
Yeah.
And know that what you're getting is authentic
that you can buy. There are plenty of other things that you can buy sight unseen on a marketplace.
Like shoes,
pair of jeans, a couch,
a bag. Not a wedding dress.
Wedding dress. No.
So, okay, speaking of fashion, I know this is a hard question, but And I also don't want to lean too hard into trends because I don't want anyone to feel like they're off trend or on trend or whatnot. But I am very curious because you are keeping relatively new dresses. They have to be within the last 4 years. What do you think is going to be, like Sarah, she guessed it, for 2025, the like trend in wedding dresses?
Oh, I wish I could answer that because market's happening next month. So we're going to really get, the designer's take on what the trends are.
Mm-hmm.
I think when it comes to trends, because of how frequent designers are releasing collections, I tell brides all the time, you will never be on trend because that collection that you bought from in 6 months is already old.
Mm-hmm.
So
Valid.
like never make your decision based off of what's trending. Feel good in it, of course. I want you to feel good in what you're wearing. And if that happens to be a trendy item, by all means, but you should never be trying to catch the trend because the trend is now and you're typically buying your dress 7 months out.
Right.
So you will always be theoretically out of trend.
That is such a good way to think about it. And like to take the stress off of making this like monumental decision because you're afraid of like, being out of
missing the mark.
Right.
Absolutely. And we get girls who unfortunately don't stop looking. They change their minds. Their dresses are brand new and they bought another dress. So they're trying to sell their other one with us.
That's the dangerous thing. Yeah. It's like at a certain point, you just got to stop looking.
You have
Turn
to
the
stop
blinders on
looking.
once you've made the decision, right?
Mm-hmm. So before we go, is there anything else that you would love to tell everybody about Loved Twice Bridal?
Yeah, I would love every girl out there who's planning their wedding to really I implore you to shop secondhand. For us, you are not compromising on style, quality, customer service. Anytime you're on our website and you want to chat to a stylist and ask her questions about a particular gown, our stylists are on the other side of that. You're getting that same one-on-one traditional bridal experience without compromising on, those sustainable values. And you're getting a really good savings. And then the second part to that is like, there's a seller on the other end who wants to give her dress another life. So how cool is it that you guys, it's like the sisterhood of the traveling pants.
Yes.
You guys are getting to share that moment together. So I implore you to entertain a secondhand dress, shop with us, sell your dress with us. Do not worry about listing your dress on your own. You are not the professional. Leave it to people who know what they're doing.
And you're saving water.
Yes.
Yeah, go Earth.
Go Earth. Well, what a perfect way to end it. Thank you so much for being with us, Sarah. It was so great to talk to you.
Thanks, guys.
So before we go, let's play a quick game of Keep It or Toss It.
Duh. Okay.
All right. So spending $35,000 on a wedding because it's average.
Well, that's like hard. Not because it's average,
right?
But because if you want a certain type of wedding and it's 2024,
right?
That's what you're spending,
right? I mean, I just say toss by doing anything based on a survey,
sure,
or taking that as Bible,
sure.
Okay, next is hiring a professional wedding planner.
Okay, I'm gonna toss it.
Yeah,
I was gonna try to have this like really diplomatic answer, but look, I recognize I worked in the space, so I didn't feel the need for one. And I recognize that people who don't work in the space need one because they're,
you don't know what you don't know.
You don't know what you don't know. But I also do think there are a million resources. I mean, shameless plug. Why can't I speak?
I can't either.
Shameless plug, Budget Savvy Bride. Like there are things, and TikTok, like honestly, YouTube, like people, there's the information is out there. People are learning how to be a home chef. Like you can learn how to be a wedding planner to an extent.
Yes.
And if you are worried about budget, like it is an expense that I do think, again, if you have the time, that you can, it depends on like your personality type and whatnot, but I just don't think it's an everybody has to do it type of expense.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, respectfully, of course.
Right. There's amazing wedding planners who will do amazing things for you and you will stress a lot less.
Yeah. And if you have the budget.
Right.
And not so much of the time,
you can obviously spend your money however you want to. But my only caveat to this is really, if you are DIYing a lot of things and you're doing all of the planning yourself, being sure to at least have like a day of month of coordinator.
Right.
Or, in a lot of cases, like if your venue has a coordinator on site, there are certain things that they would take on that like maybe a wedding planner would. The roles are very, very different. So it's important to know what they are going to take care of and what they're not. But at a very minimum, you want some sort of point person on the day of.
Yeah, you absolutely need that. Like
1,000%.
Yeah, that's definitely, like that's what I would definitely say.
Yeah.
That's what you need without question. And a wedding planner is a luxury.
Yeah, it is. It is. Okay, so next is DIY decorations to save money.
Yeah, keep it.
I'm going to keep it.
And then like find somebody else getting married at your venue and give it to them.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, pass it forward.
Let's be more savvy and sustainable with this stuff. Less waste.
Yeah, less waste.
Yeah. Okay, so opting for a smaller guest list.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna say keep, because all I hear like is your voice in my head saying that.
But you can have your wedding was not small.
No, but we picked a cap number.
Oh, yeah.
And like we had to say no to some people on both sides.
Yeah.
Because we were like, we're not going over this number because then it blows our budget.
Yeah.
And it is the quickest thing that will make your budget go over is the number.
Yeah.
Is the number of people. Like it just somehow it multiplies.
Yes.
What you're spending.
No, it does exponentially.
Yeah. And I think like if you can, I'm not saying like if you want 120 people and you go down to 30, like that's a different wedding.
Yeah. A completely different experience and vibe. And
right. But the smaller, like the less people that you have that you're spending this money on, the further your dollar stretches and the better experience you can give them.
Very true. Okay.
Like if you want that raw bar or that sushi bar or, that expensive, it's always seafood. It could be $22 more a head.
Wow.
And if you really want that, how many people are you willing to cut to get there? That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, it's all weighing the options and tallying all of the expenses. Okay, so next is using credit cards to cover wedding expenses.
Okay, I'm a keep and a toss here.
Oh.
Because I think you keep it, obviously, because you rack up points and then you get free, can I say shit? Free shit for your honeymoon. You could get your flights, your hotels, like you can almost have it fully paid for if you're like actually really smart with how you plan out these charges on your card.
Yeah.
However, I think the toss is if you are not strict with that, putting it on a credit card, you spend more.
Right.
And I mean, you already do because they usually charge a fee. If you're not sending a check or paying in cash, there is usually a credit card fee like that the vendor will charge.
Yeah.
So it already is a little bit more. It sometimes feels worth it if you're going to end up with a free trip to Greece.
If you're trying to hit like a sign up bonus.
Yeah. Yep. But I think it is so much easier when you're like swiping and forgetting to go over your budget, because like if you're not seeing that number literally just like come out of your account and like what's left. Yeah.
Yeah. It's I mean, I'm kind of the same. Like it always has to come with a caveat, obviously.
Sure.
You have to be financially responsible and keep track of what you're spending and make sure you have enough cash to pay your card balance off in full every month so you don't pay the exorbitant interest rates associated with the credit card. But I mean, it's such a smart way to get your honeymoon practically free.
Don't sleep on points.
Right. I mean, literally. Okay. So last one is relying on friends and family to work as frienders, like in place of a traditional vendor. Oh, wait.
Tricked ya. Keep. Okay, I'm keeping this 100%. I mean, you were one of mine, but like,
are you just saying that because I'm sitting across from you right now?
No, like truly, this is something that I don't know what episode it was, but like I have talked about like your network being. Like you think about it when you're looking for a job or anything, like you use your network, you tap into them.
Yeah.
I think it should be the same thing for your wedding. I think everybody loves a job at a wedding. They love to feel important.
Included.
Cater to their strengths. I mean, even like your bridesmaids, they're not a vendor, but like they can be a friender in some ways because you can give them like really important stuff to do on the day of and know that it'll get done. I think it gets dicey if you're like, you know, give me this, but like you're also expecting a gift, or, you know, I think like you also like have to tip your friender. You like if that is going to be weird for you, then I would say stay away from it. If this person maybe like gets really anxious when they're working, or like, you know, is like kind of a different persona in their workspace, maybe you want them to just be able to like enjoy the day and not have that, as much as it could be nice to have somebody in your circle who already does the thing that you need.
Right.
So it's like, you know, it's always a caveat, but keep it if it's like, if those things align.
Yeah.
But don't, I also feel like people shouldn't feel beholden to having to use somebody that's in their circle if they don't want to.
Yeah.
Like, meshing business and family and friends can be awkward.
It can be.
And just because somebody does a thing that's relatively close or is the thing you need, I don't think it's like anybody should expect that you have to use them because of that.
Right. I think you have to evaluate all of these things on a case-by-case basis and like consider the relationship you have, the expectations. And like no matter what, even if you do use a friend, like having some sort of like gentle written agreement in place, just so expectations are clear on both sides.
You still need that. And if that's awkward for you, then like maybe that's not.
Yeah. Definitely something to consider. Last one. Sorry, I was wrong. Setting aside a contingency fund in the budget.
I mean, duh. Keep it. You have to. If you don't do that, you're
setting yourself up for failure.
Right. It's like right from the beginning, 10%. 10%. So if you have decided.
The buffer is just needed.
If you've decided on that cap number, subtract 10% and that's your top number.
Yes. Because then it allows for any of those little budget creep, scope creep things.
And there will be.
Yeah.
There will be. Or there'll be something you completely forgot. Or there will be a trend that you see on TikTok and you decide a week before your wedding, you must do it. So you need some budget.
Yes. Yeah. So always a good thing to keep in mind. Well, this was great. Hopefully it gave everyone a lot to think about.
Yeah.
I think the biggest takeaway is, you know, that the average isn't a one-size-fits-all benchmark, and hopefully we've just given everyone a lot to think about.
Yeah, I know I'm thinking about a lot, so this is a good one.
Yes.
This episode is brought to you by Loved Twice Bridal. Buy and sell once-loved designer wedding gowns at lovedtwicebridal.com.
Thanks for tuning in to the Bouquet Toss from the team at thebudgetsavvybride.com. The Bouquet Toss is part of the Love Stories TV podcast network.
Your support for the show makes it all possible, so don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe on all your favorite streaming platforms, and follow Budget Savvy Bride on social media.
As always, stay savvy and stay tuned for our next episode.